and the other partner is not asking. They're just assuming everything's good, and eventually it all comes out. And it's, wait a minute, you haven't been happy for how long? Wait a minute, how long have you been sitting on this information? Well, here's my list of all the things that I've been accumulating behind the scenes and not telling you about, all this stuff.
We're giving you that thing to do to help prevent what will unzip, which is the relationship down the line. So set a goal, 1 gratitude for the next 30 days, give that to your partner. And then as you're tracking that habit, see how many reds you fall off, see how many reds you get. Conscious couples, business partners, and singles committed to attracting their dream partner. Welcome to the Conscious Couples podcast, where we share our life, love story, and combined relationship expertise to help you create and consistently cultivate the most magnificent, intimate relationship possible.
Never again will you feel hopeless and alone in your intimate relationship challenges.
Having accumulated thousands of hours coaching conscious couples and individuals all over the world, as well as starting and growing a global business together, Alan and I are here to guide you in all things relationships.
Thank you again for tuning into the one place where it's not about you or me, it's about the we. Conscious couples and individuals, welcome back to the one and only Conscious Couples podcast. Today we have episode 162, how dangerous it is to assume nothing is wrong. You never assume nothing's wrong. That's called lack of humility. Before we jump into this episode, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Next Level Podcast Solutions for producing this show and almost 60 others. My goodness.
Whoop.
My goodness. And including both Next Level University and Evolve Ventures. If you have not checked out those podcasts, that is something that will help you on your growth journey tremendously. Personal growth, personal development, self-improvement, mental health. Sweetheart, as always, ladies first, what is your intention for today's episode?
So my intention for today's episode is to help our listeners ground and root themselves back down into a very fundamental principle of humility that we all need. And they likely already have a good system of that, but I do think that this episode will help them ground even deeper into that. So that.
Last night, Emilia and I, yesterday afternoon, driving home from the gym, Emilia and I talked about, you know how when you get a bottle of medicine, you have no idea where I'm going with it. Emilia has no idea where I'm going with it.
I'm excited.
You know, you get a bottle of medicine, whatever it is, and there's a warning label. Emilia thinks that before every podcast, training, speaking engagement, coaching session, I need to give a warning label, disclaimer. This is not the way that she said it.
Definitely not.
Yeah, she didn't say that. I was trying to make you laugh.
Cute.
Yeah, so.
Are you hitting on me on the show?
Definitely. 100%, sweetheart.
Cute.
But anyways, so I did that on Next Level University earlier.
How'd it
So this
go?
is very well. It went
Good.
way better than this.
Did you do the same?
Yeah, way
Okay.
better than this. All right, so usually I say a disclaimer of I'm an engineer.
Yeah.
And that gives me permission to be very calculated, even though I don't articulate things in a non-mathematical way of thinking. So I'm going to provide context. I do think setting the stage is really important. Conscious couples and singles out there watching or listening to this, we are here for one reason and one reason only: to improve you, to help you improve yourself, and to improve your intimate relationship. And when you improve yourself, you will improve your intimate relationship, assuming that you're with someone who is also working on themselves.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to provide context. So here's the disclaimer, the warning label on the bottle. May cause temporary blindness. I'm joking. I'm joking. I knew Emilia was going to listen to that.
Actually, it may cause clear thinking
Yes.
and clearer sight and clearer life.
This episode brought to you by Claritin Clear. No.
Okay.
All right.
So that's actually a really good frame to share the grounding story in this, unless there's any other warning label disclaimers you'd like to give.
No,
on that.
I do. Playful aside, I really sit in the discomfort of this.
Yeah.
This conversation, this podcast is not to make you feel good about yourself. It's not to make you feel good about your relationship. It's not to make you feel good. We are not here to feel good. We are here to learn about ourselves, others, and the world. And we are here to sit in uncomfortable, hard truths so that we can be empowered to build a bigger, better, brighter future with our partner.
Heck yeah. And I'll add, the only feel good that really comes as a result of listening to this podcast episode, although it sounds dark and gloomy, is like to feel good about the trek that you're on. So if you're a conscious couple that's listening to this podcast, like feel good at the fact that you're growing, you're learning, and you're educating yourself around relationships so that you and your partner can grow together. I think that is so important because, for example, there was a couple that you and I, a couple of years ago now, actually, we were on a relationship talks free session, or at that time she was a client?
No, free session.
Okay, so it was a free session.
I think this is the first one, and then they became clients.
That makes sense. Okay, yep. So we were on this free session, and you and I were actually in the Berkshires at the time. It was really, really nice and great conversation. And what had essentially brought this individual to us was essentially the premise of this episode, where she and her partner had been together for a couple of years at that point. Her words, they got started kind of not necessarily on the right foot. However, they quickly moved in together. They started a life together. I believe that they even had some dogs in the mix and whatnot. Long story short, they started to grow apart because the partner that was on the phone call with us, turns out years over, she was the more growth-oriented of the two. And her partner was doing this one thing that in this podcast episode, I don't want anyone to do. And it was the fact that she was assuming that nothing was wrong. Her partner consistently assumed that nothing was wrong in their relationship. So what didn't they do? They didn't have check-ins. They didn't check in on the status of their relationship, how they felt about it. They didn't check in on how their communication was going. They didn't check in on their own personal levels of growth and velocity and the growth gap that we've talked about in former episodes. They really didn't check in on what was going on inside the relationship. So they essentially were existing and coexisting in relationship, but in parallel. They weren't coming together, talking about what it is that they're in terms of the relationship, and then going outside and sharing each other's individual perspectives. And what did that accumulate to? What did that build up to? It built up to essentially them on the brink of, were they married at the time?
Yes.
Okay, it was on the brink of divorce. And the partner that came to us, really humble, very growth-oriented woman, and in such a beautiful cry for help way said, I don't know what to do because my partner does not see that we're having all these issues to the extent that I am.
Well, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes what Emilia and I have found in the last 4 years of coaching couples is there's usually one partner who's more cowardly. In my relationship, that's me. Emilia tends to bring things up quicker than I do. I tend to struggle to express hard truths, in case you didn't notice. And the other partner tends to lack humility. They tend to assume things are better than they are, that kind of thing. Humility, courage, and vulnerability is a staple of this podcast. There's the triad of, I remember I took a fire protection course, fire engineering course back in college. Loved it. And there's the fire triangle. It's oxygen, fuel, and heat makes fire. So picture a triangle with fire in the middle. Now picture humility, courage, and vulnerability with fire in the middle for transformation. This couple could not transform without humility, courage, and vulnerability. One of the partners was less growth-oriented and not very humble, not humble enough to say, I wonder how my partner is. I wonder if we're doing well. I wonder if we should check in. And then, quite frankly, the partner who had reached out to us, and we were honest, and she wouldn't mind us sharing this because we're very close with her, is she was being cowardly.
Yeah, courage was the thing. And to this day, we're working on that.
She was too scared to bring up, hey, what the fuck? Right? And obviously don't bring it up that way. Bring it up in a non-violent communication way. I was being playful with that because I want to make Emilia laugh. But no, seriously, sweetheart. How often? Nice. How often? Goodness. It's springtime. We're excited. How often do you see lack of courage leading to lack of humility in other relationships?
All the time. There's not one person that I currently work with that has someone in their life, obviously intimate partners, right? Who they are not being courageous enough with.
Yeah. And
the relationship is suffering as a result of that. And or less on this front, actually. And I'm very grateful for this. But a lot of clients that I do have usually struggle in that arena. Not as much do I work with people who are the less humble one in the relationship. However, I have worked with individuals who tended to fall on the less humble, and their relationship was crumbling because of that. And that's any person that I kind of have come into my orbit that is the less humble of the relationship. It is so difficult to work with that type of person because if you don't have humility, my role, my job in being in that chair for you is to kind of let you know that you're the problem in a way.
Yeah.
Not necessarily you, but the lack of humility that you're embodying and enabling in the relationship. And so turning that mirror on people, they don't like it. However, that's what the role that I get to play in their life is. And ironically, the same person, by being able to do the beautiful work that you and I do, that turning the mirror on that person and recognizing, because I actually also got to work with this person's partner.
Yeah.
She has since had tremendous transformation as a result of that. And I remember one specific conversation that we had where I had asked her 0 to 10, how humble do you think you are? And we actually got to confront her ego. She was at like an 8.
Yeah.
And then after we had gone through each one of the courageous, humble, and vulnerable, I shared with her, you know, what are her scales that she's putting herself on? So what is her 10? What is her 0? And then I shared my input. Nice. And it helped her really see the cognitive distortion, i.e. where she was turning unintentionally and unconsciously turning a blind eye to how much her ego was assuming that nothing was wrong and that her lack of humility was actually negatively impacting the relationship all along.
Well, this is what happens. This is a cycle that we've seen countless times. The less courageous partner brushes it under the rug, brushes it under the rug, brushes it under the rug, doesn't want to confront it, doesn't want to confront it, doesn't want to confront it. Yeah. I empathize tremendously with that. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, and the other partner is not asking. They're just assuming everything's good. And eventually it all comes out. And it's, wait a minute, you haven't been happy for how long? Yeah. Wait a minute. How long have you been sitting on this information? Well, here's my list of all the things that I've been accumulating behind the scenes and not telling you about, all this stuff. And then what happens is the more courageous, or the partner that was cowardly that has that moment of courage goes near the red button. They threaten to break up. They say, I can't do this anymore. Whatever it is, okay? Yeah. Then the other partner gets all the humble pie at once, and they're usually, not always, but usually they're willing to, whatever it takes. Of course, let's do it. And then they do relationship talks coaching. And they come in and go, and now they're ready to do the work.
Post-traumatic growth.
Here's the problem. Yeah, literally. Here's the problem. The moment things get good again, they often lose the humility.
A little over a year and a half ago, I attended my first relationship call with Alan and Emilia. And as a single mother, I was very curious what I was actually going to be able to take away from it. I was very blown away with how deep we could actually go in that first session alone. It really opened the doors and opened my eyes to a lot of my patterning and wounding around relationships. Through attending some of their live events and through work with them, I have really grown in confidence, in learning how to love and show up for myself, which has been huge, and it's really set the bar high when in terms of standards for relationships and what I desire and need out of a relationship. They very much practice what they preach, and it's so nice to see people working consciously on relationships. Again, it's really set the bar high for what I look for and what I desire in a relationship. So I'm super grateful to be able to learn and grow from them and be a part of this community.
Here's what I'm going to share with everybody out there, and I gave the disclaimer already. If you or your partner lose humility the moment you're winning, humility is something that needs to be developed while you're winning. And everyone's humble when they're losing. So don't let the losses go to your heart. Don't let the wins go to your head. That's a good, powerful saying.
Love it.
And honestly, I've been guilty of being arrogant in the past for sure. The moment in business or in my life when I start to rest on success it goes so fast. You know, the moment, oh yeah, 35 clients, baby. All of a sudden it's like dropping like flies. I start neglecting all this stuff. You got to stay humble. And it's very hard to have self-belief and humility come hand in hand. So you got to believe in yourself long-term, but you have to hold the humility in the day-to-day. Emilia and I, for a 6 month, I'm probably exaggerating that, probably 3 to 6 months. I'm not sure exactly, but we do the gratitude game every single night. I say 3 things I'm most grateful for about Emilia. She says 3 things she's most grateful for about me, unless we are down and out, in which case we postpone and I do 6 the next night.
And then I try to get a 7th.
Yeah, nice. And for a period there, we've been doing this since we met. I have all the audios saved from our first year together.
So cute.
You know, we listened to some of them on our anniversary. But anyways, we were little babies back then. But anyways, so we, for like a 6-month period, 3 to 6 months, stopped doing gratitudes. To me, we got arrogant. I came to Emilia and I said, I think we got arrogant.
Yes.
Our relationship is amazing and we're getting a little arrogant. I think we need the gratitude game back because I feel like I'm more entitled than I don't feel as grateful as I used to be, right?
Yeah.
So what does humility look like? Because a lot of people think I'm arrogant, and I understand why. But I think we don't understand what humility actually looks like. No one would consider you super humble or me super humble. I want to try to reframe humility. Humility is someone who's reading the books when no one's watching. Humility is someone who's taking the courses. Humility is someone who has a therapist or a coach. I have a therapist. You have a therapist. Humility is someone who, behind the scenes, is putting in the work on themselves to make sure they're a better partner. Humility is me coming to Emilia last night on a Sunday saying, hey, is there anything about me, my character, or our relationship that's been frustrating you lately that you wish didn't, but it still sort of does? That's called the permission question. We've done episodes about it in the past. Someone who's arrogant and assumes everything's fine doesn't go out of their way to ask that question.
Right.
And so how do you balance self-belief and humility? And how do you determine whether or not you're the partner who needs more courage or you're the partner who needs to eat some humble pie? Because you don't want to eat humble pie when your partner wants to leave you. You want to eat humble pie a little bit along the way instead of having it shoved in your face in a pie eating contest.
I love that. So, honey, one of the things when I first met you, I had shared and illuminated to you was that you're one of the most humble humans I've come across. You're like, I don't know if I think I'm humble, something along that. And I'm like, a humble person would think that. So over time, as you've been able to learn about your own levels of high humility in comparison to the statistical norm, and given the fact that they're like all the people that you work with and you and I work with combined, what have you found to be, for those people who are listening to this episode, a takeaway for them? What have you found to be the most helpful level setting inner thought or practice that someone, let's say, for example, we have a listener listening to this episode and they maybe think that they've been experiencing in their relationship that their partner unintentionally, unconsciously, and unknowingly assumes everything's good. If this listener were to send it to their partner's way, what would you say to them that would help them develop this practice of humility so that they can consistently level set themselves so they no longer are assuming nothing's wrong, but rather they have a practice that helps suss out those challenges?
My answer is different than it would have used to been. I think that if you don't have goals, it's very hard to get humble pie. So when you set goals that are measured, you realize how much you suck. Seriously.
Yeah.
Like try to read a book a week all year.
Yeah.
I have one client who's reading a book a week. It is super humbling. A book a week sounds easy to me. That is brutal in practice. Yeah. People who lack humility, they're not in practice, they're in theory. Mm-hmm. In theory, running a 5K is easy. In practice, it's fucking brutal. Emilia and I did it last year. Mm. It's you need to proactively seek out humility, which I don't think you will do unless you have high goals. And you won't have high measurable goals unless you have self-belief. So a lot of times people who have lower self-belief internally, even though they don't say it out loud or maybe even are aware of it, they don't have high goals. To me, my goals constantly humble me. Yeah. Like, seriously, anyone watching or listening, I really want to make this clear. Like, if you're on YouTube, I look fat. Like, this is a bad angle. And I'm bulking and I'm hitting a 200-pound mark. Now, that doesn't mean that I think I'm fat compared to anyone out there watching or listening. I'm fat compared to my own goals. So a lot of people, they say, well, if you think you're fat, you must think I'm really fat. No. This is me versus me.
Yeah.
And so I think that goals are the ultimate level set. If you don't have goals that humble you, you will inevitably become arrogant on accident. Most of my clients, they all track metrics. All of my clients track metrics and habits, and they all have measurable goals and measurable priorities. They get humble pie every day. They get a report card every day. So there is no arrogance. And that's really twofold. Number one, I coach people who are humble, have high work ethic, and usually struggle with self-worth, because I've tried to coach the people that have inflated self-worth. And the people who have inflated self-worth are often a big fish in a small pond of their own making.
Yeah. Love that. Okay, so the person that receives this episode, they're going to now set a goal, and they're going to set a goal even if they don't have high self-belief. What is that goal? And this is a really good thing to round up this episode.
For whoever's listening to this episode, love, is most likely the more growth-oriented partner. So what I would actually have them do instead, if you don't mind, is ask their partner about their goals. Does your partner have measurable goals in the future that inevitably humble them? Like, if you're trying to lose 10 pounds in 10 weeks, you're going to have to be humble to do that. You're going to have to be. But that's goals force you to look in the mirror, unless they're statusy goals.
Right.
Like if you can buy a new car with a credit card and pretend you're awesome, like that's not going to work to humble you. If anything, that'll inflate your ego. So I would have the courage to ask your partner about their goals. Because if you have a partner that doesn't have any goals, and I've had that in the past, and so have you, they were naturally arrogant without even meaning to be, even though they thought we were arrogant.
Right.
What would you say before we go?
I actually would. I am 1,000% with you in what you just said. And I would add to this, yes, okay. If our listeners send their partner or someone that they might be dating this and saying, hey, what are your thoughts on this? This is speaking to the person that maybe is assuming nothing's wrong. I would have them actually set a relationship goal within the next 30 days. How many gratitudes, or I'm going to give 30 gratitudes each day. Just something small that we mentioned.
One gratitude each day for 30 days.
One gratitude each day for 30 days. Yeah.
Dude, 30 gratitudes a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
And put that on some sort of habit tracking device and see how much just that alone humbles you.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if that lack of humble pie that you're not eating every single day is going to come out one day. And that's usually on the brink of a divorce or a breakup. And so I don't want that happening because you didn't know what effort to put in. And so using this episode, we're giving you that thing to do to help prevent what will unzip, which is the relationship down the line. So set a goal, one gratitude for the next 30 days, give that to your partner. And then as you're tracking that habit, see how many reds you fall off, see how many reds you get, and I think that will be a really great starting point for anyone who assumes that nothing's wrong.
Now, remember, going from high inflated, overly self-worth to actually accurate thinking is very brutal.
Yeah.
Because if you want to believe you're better than you are, and then you try to do one gratitude a day and you get a bunch of X's, you're going to realize you're not as disciplined as you thought. Right. You're not as grateful as you thought. That's actually progress, but it feels pretty terrible.
Yeah.
An apple a day keeps the doctor away. A gratitude a day keeps divorce at bay.
Yes. Woo!
What
Fire.
Do you say?
I say yay.
All right. So we have relationship talks coaching. Speaking of humble pie, if you are struggling seriously and you are sick and tired of feeling sick and tired in your relationship and you want to grow together, not apart, please click the link in the show notes. The first one is free. Relationship talks coaching. Emilia and I love those so much. Every Saturday. Talk soon.
Yes. Also in the show notes is going to be our invite link for our next relationship talks event. The top 10 most common ways partners mistreat each other. Assuming nothing's wrong is definitely one of them. But it's one of those subtle things that chips away at whatever love, relationship, connection that you have. So don't miss out. That's going to be on March 20th, which is a Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that you and your partner can grow together, not apart. Be there, be square. Alan and I spend so much time trying to make sure time and conscious effort that we are growing together and we're treating each other with love, kindness, and respect. And that is so much harder when you have goals. It is so much more difficult when you have multiple priorities. And so there's many things that we've learned on there and gotten humble pie on. We can do better. And so if you're in the conscious community, there's things that you can do better on too. And those top 10 ways that people end up mistreating each other in a relationship is what we're going to review in that.
So here's what's going to happen. You're out there watching or listening and you're thinking, you know what? I know that I'm being a little bit mistreated by my partner. So you're going to come and learn how. And then you're going to go, uh-oh, I'm mistreating my partner too.
Unintentionally.
Unintentionally. So if you want to be better, please join us. We hope to see you there. And again, as always, thank you. It's not about you or me. It's about the we. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Conscious Couples podcast. We love connecting with the Conscious Couples community, so please make sure you follow us on Instagram. I am at Evolve with Emilia, and Alan is alazarus88.
Also, if you or your partner resonated with this episode, leave us a review at the link in the show notes, and please share this with someone you love and care about.
Until next time, remember, it's not about you or me. It's about
the we.